just sucks that like, I think the reason why that came to be was because I really trusted this person. I really let this person in. And it's so interesting, you know, it's the people that you let in the most or the deepest that really like when they cut the cuts, it cuts deep. And it affects other areas of your life.
All right, we started in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yo, what's good, everyone? Welcome to the Kwentossential podcast, where we talk about stories that shape us. But man, today is such a hot day. But we got a special guest for y'all today. Super cool person I've met in my senior year of high school. She gave me an introduction, so I'm gonna just read it out for y'all because your boy don't know this from the top of his head. So it goes, so our guest is a multimedia freelance journalist with a keen interest on issues related to the African continent, as well as the African diaspora? I don't know how to read. She has international experience in community facilitation, radio show production, and documentary filmmaking. Her ideal assignment marries storytelling and accountability. She has a passion for reshaping and creating new narratives surrounding the African continent, as well as the African diaspora. I think I said
Diaspora.
that right.
Yeah, you're getting there.
Yo, it's a struggle, okay? Through telling story. Now I lost myself. Through storytelling in all its forms. She is a content. She's currently the blog coordinator and head editor for the Diaspora. I think I said that right. A platform for young African women worldwide, and is a podcast host of Filling the Void with Josie, a podcast for lifelong learners who may or may not believe university was a scam. Ladies and gentlemen, my good friend Josie.
Yo. Thanks for having me on, Jonathan.
But yeah, thanks for coming out, man. I really appreciate you for coming on, because, man, I'm not gonna lie, and I shared this earlier to you, but for everyone listening, this podcast honestly was like, it came from an interview an episode from your podcast that we did with some of our homies from high school, a 10-year reunion of sorts.
That I still need to finish editing, but it's gonna see the light of day.
That's what I was wondering. I was looking for that, but I understand the struggle because it's hard. It's hard to edit.
You know, and I think it's a mix of everything that's been going on also behind the scenes. But when it comes out, it's gonna be dope. I have been thoroughly enjoying re-listening to it all because y'all are crazy in the best way possible.
I mean, hey, it is what it is. I'm excited to listen to it, and of course, when it comes out, I'll share it out to everyone that's listening here as well. But yeah, so Josie, how you been, man?
In what sense? During this pandemic, or since high school?
Okay, well, we'll start off with the pandemic. How you been with the pandemic?
Oh my goodness. You know what? I feel as if this pandemic has had different phases, well, literally, but also individually for me, because at the beginning of it all, like, it wasn't really that big a deal for me. Because I still kind of had my job. I was still working. Things had shifted completely though. Technically the position that I was in allowed me, I had to travel for work. And so due to COVID,
what did you do?
I was working at a nonprofit. I was the internship coordinator at a nonprofit. And we basically facilitated internships for university students, both here in Montreal and in Northern Uganda. And we worked on like community development work where locals really kind of took the lead. So if you hear some noise in the background, that's my 2-year-old niece who is just living her best life.
She's so cute. She was singing on the microphone earlier.
And now she's back for her second debut. But after I finished that position, things were just like, okay, I see why so many people were like, this is not a vibe, this is not it. Because as I was looking for work, I was also, I had my hopes out for a lot of different opportunities, and the waiting is hard, when you're just like, are we moving forward? Like, should I look elsewhere? What's happening? And so I thought that a lot of different things were going to be happening this year, which technically, we are still in the pandemic. And there were just so many ups and downs, and
Yeah.
I had to definitely turn a lot to my faith and just try to be like, what do you believe? Like, are you able to hang on to it? Are you able to just believe that, all things will work out, and that, you don't have to give into the anxiety and let that overwhelm you, but rather, repeat what you know to be true and
Mhm.
work on what you can, like focus on what you can control. And so, yeah, a lot of mental strengthening has been
Yes.
kind of what 2021 has been like for me. But here we are now in this heat wave.
Yo, tell me about it. Like, I'm sorry to everyone who's watching this video. I'm wearing a tank top and I'm showing a lot more skin than usual because it's mad hot. I'm
It's too hot.
dying. What's the weather out there for you in Montreal?
Today it's fine. But honestly, I really can't tell you because we finally got an AC unit,
Right.
and all I do is spend my day inside now because
Right.
outside is dusty and I am not made for the streets.
Yeah, no, like for me, like I only go out when like the sun is going down. It's like I feel like I'm a vampire, honestly,
That's
at
the
this
thing.
point.
When the sun goes down here, though, it's super humid, and these mosquitoes also like to come out at that time. So
Ooh,
it's a lose situation. It
you're right,
seems
you're right.
like,
So home is the safe place for sure.
but sometimes I do peek outside, and I'm like,
Yeah.
hmm.
So, okay, now that we kind of talked about the pandemic, how you been like after high actually, yeah, how you been after high school? Because like that's when everyone kind of just disappeared.
Ooh, my goodness, we went our completely different ways, and it was just so interesting. Chishante.
No.
Okay. My niece again is
No,
making
that's
her
all good.
debut. So post high school, well, first of all, my experience was quite different from everyone else's because I only joined the high school we went to in the last year.
Right, right.
So I was only there for 1 year. All y'all already kind of knew each other. I'm this new kid from America.
Yeah, okay. Let's actually, yeah, before we go into university, let's talk about that. Like,
Mhm.
before I met you, I didn't know where Cameroon was. I am not
Oh.
gonna lie. And so, okay, I guess before that, since you're talking about it, where were you before we met senior year of high school?
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm actually originally from Cameroon. That's in West Africa or Central, depending on who you're speaking to.
Mhm.
These colonizers, they came up with the borders anyway. So,
Tell
whatever
'em.
you're vibing with. And then I was raised in the States, in the United States of America.
America.
And it's not looking too good for them right now.
No, it's not.
But I'm coming from the South, and I was raised there up until I moved to Canada about 10 years ago now, and I was living my best life in the South. I wasn't really. I know that seems like an oxymoron, living your best life in the South of the United States of America, knowing its history and seeing my
Yeah,
skin color and all.
yeah.
But the thing is, I was an African / still am. So I wasn't, me and my family, we weren't really used to the whole like racism thing, right?
Really?
Yeah, because I mean, if when you're in Cameroon or the majority of any other African country, like you're not the minority,
Right,
you don't recognize your blackness because everybody's black. That's not the thing that delineates people. It's mainly probably like tribes or a language or something like that. However, once you come to America, it's this thing of like, oh, so y'all are super obsessed with my skin color. So like race is a thing. You realize this is a social construct, right? Anyways,
Hey man,
but
speak on that, yo.
it has a hefty hold on us.
Yeah.
But I wasn't, like I said, I wasn't really like paying attention to those things because it wasn't so like in my face. I can't really tell you of like particular encounters that really made me recognize, oh my goodness, this is like super racist or whatever. I'm sure there were, but like at the time I didn't recognize it. And then when I moved to Canada, Montreal specifically, Montreal is so multicultural. It's
Yes.
quite diverse. And I went from being like this kid who spoke multiple languages, and who was kind of, coming from abroad or whatever, to just some regular girl who actually wasn't even that special, because you come to Montreal and people not only speak 2 languages, but they speak 3 or more, right? And the majority of people are immigrants, so everyone's coming from somewhere else. Everyone has that story. It was equal parts interesting as it was like, okay, now where do I fit in? What's going on?
Right.
But then when I went to the high school that we went to, and I'm not naming it specifically because, like, we don't need to name it. Like,
it is what it is.
Well, just the high school we went to.
Right.
We know what we're talking about. It was so cool to see because it was a religious high school. And I was expecting it to be kind of like the high school I had just come from, which was a boarding school that was also religious. And I really enjoyed like the educators and the teachers there.
Mm-hmm.
But when I came to our high school, I was so shocked and appalled. I was just like,
I remember.
Y'all are supposed to be Christians. What's going on here?
I remember. I'm not gonna lie though. When you first came, I kind of just didn't like you, to be honest. I know. I'm being honest. Like, now we're friends. Now we good. But like when I first met you, my first impression was like, "Yo, what is her problem?"
Oh, we're intimidated. It's okay.
Yeah. No,
I've gotten that
I'm
before.
serious. Like, because you came in with a personality of like trying to recreate, I guess, something from your past or like your past experience. And we were all kind of just a bunch of delinquents trying to just, get through what we thought life was going to be like. And so,
yeah. The thing is, when I say y'all are supposed to be Christians, I'm talking about the adults. I vibe with the students.
Oh, that is true.
But it's okay. You can keep putting yourself out there. Tell me the truth because I want to hear it. But the thing is, like, okay, merci, shishi. The thing is, because I knew that, like, the school accepted all types of students, whether you had a particular faith or not, right? Yeah. This girl is.
I love her. She's so
Let me help
funny.
you out. Whether you had a particular faith or not, I was like, okay, let's chill. So I didn't have any particular expectations for the students, but the staff, right? If you are like, oh, we hold ourselves to the standard, and then you actually don't go about doing it,
yes,
then of course I'm going to judge you. Of course I'm going to be like, that's actually hypocritical,
Yeah.
And it was just very shocking for me. And I think that's why I turned more towards, maybe like 2 staff members, and then the rest was like the students that I vibe with, right? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So if everyone is just listening to this on the audio, please check out our YouTube page, Kwentossentials, to see the actual behind the scenes of what's going on. Because Josie's little niece is so funny.
I'm trying to convince her to. I'm trying to convince her to go downstairs, maybe go watch some Coco Melon, but she's like, no, I want to be a part of this podcast.
It's because she sees her face on the camera. That's why. So.
Yeah, I should hide myself. I should hide it.
I mean, if you want to, it's all good.
But yeah, no, I appreciate you sharing that too, because, I mean, of course, I'm very intuitive.
Right.
I'm very sensitive as well. Like, I'm able to really pick up on energy and vibes, and I can sense that, there was something there.
There was tension for sure. The first half.
Well, I really don't. I don't remember the details of it.
Okay,
all.
so
It's just
I remember
the overall feelings. Please tell me.
Okay,
because
so the reason why
I also tried to block a lot of things out of my head to
But I think, at least from my experience on our freshman year, I had this high horse mentality of like I was the known Christian kid. So every time there was like a Christian class, like a ethics class or whatever, I was always the one that people would look to for like the answers, and I kind of took pride in that, which is, looking back now, is the wrong perspective, especially if you want to talk about someone higher than yourself. Anyways, I was kind of upset because now you're taking my steam, my gas, like
Whoa.
I was just like, yo,
I didn't even realize
this? Right, who is this? And what made it worse, and then mind you, this was okay for all the people listening, this was high school, okay? This is not me anymore. But I was upset.
It's been a decade.
Yeah, it's been 10 years, man. Come on. But I was upset with you specifically because we had like this crew of people who worked together during tests, per se.
Lol.
We'll just say that. Well, we worked
It was a
together.
collaborative effort.
Yeah, it was a group test, even if it wasn't. And you didn't want to take part in it. And I remember it was a struggle to get you to cooperate, to even get your assignment like last minute be like, hey, did you do the assignment? I'm like, no. And then Josie would be like, yeah, I did it. And I'm like, yo, can we see? And we're like, no, And I was like, all right, yo, this girl, man, who is this?
Lol. Oh my goodness, that's so funny.
I don't know if you remember that, but I remember that was like my first experience with you. And I was like, yo, how are you not vibing with this girl whatsoever? But it was only like honestly, towards the end when everyone kind of gave up because it was senior year. We're getting the senioritis. Everyone was just like, you know what?
Yeah.
We're all going to graduate. So let's all just chill. And I think that's when like we finally just like became kind of friends per se.
I think what was also interesting from this is like from my perspective now, I suppose, was that like at the time we were both going to the same like denominational church, right? And so we would also kind of bump into each other on the weekends.
Yes.
Right. And so, but the thing is, there was also tension in terms of like the whole denomination thing. Like this is like for me anyways. And I never felt as if I was really like included or accepted in the different groups, right? So there was like the group at my church and then there was the group at your church.
Oh yeah. I remember.
And there were other people from the group of my church, because I mean they were raised there, that was their family members. I was even the outsider within that group, but like they vibe with a lot of the people within the from the group in your church. But like I never really vibe, and I didn't get why, because the thing is, I was like, I wanted to. I thought I was putting out, like, oh, let's hang out, let's like, be friends and stuff. But I never felt as if it was reciprocated. And so for me, I understood that it was kind of like, okay, you've got your crew. Even though, to be fair, you were actually very friendly, like, oh, this is my friend from school, like inviting me to things, like come hang out with my crew and stuff like that. But it was like, you were the only one, and it's just like, you can only do so much, you're one person. So it was also just kind of like, but I think, I chalk it all up to youth, because we were probably all trying to figure out ourselves, all trying to like see what's going on here, but
I think it also came down to the fact that these youth groups kind of lived off its own bubble. Like, you know what I mean? Like it was always a struggle. Unlike, for example, like myself, who went to a school that had multiple groups of people from different backgrounds. Some of these guys in these youth groups kind of just stuck among themselves. And there was always a separation between what they did in church and what they did in school or whatever else, right? And the thing is, like, I'm speaking only obviously from my own experience, where it's like, I was kind of the opposite. The side group was the church group. For me, it was everyone else outside. And so like, I guess coming out and like, hey, introducing new people, always wanting to meet new people was always kind of like my thing. Cause that was how I associated myself outside of church. And like, in fact, looking back at it now, some people actually were upset that I was bringing new people into the group, because they were like, oh, we want to be exclusive. But I'm like, yo, if we're going to talk about, youth groups and growing and all these things, we need new people, man. I'm tired of y'all faces, to be honest.
Well, and now look what's going on. Not to say that that's the reason. I'm just saying that like growth is valuable, but again, chalk it up to youth and experience, and just, you want to be exclusive, and that's fine, and that's understandable, right?
Yeah. Also, looking back, thinking about it now, I think one of the reasons why I didn't enjoy your company was because you kind of
company.
Yeah, like what I was talking about earlier. Like I didn't like you when I first met you. I think it's because you were one of the first people I met who could call me out on stuff.
Really?
I mean, like more so stuff on like the religious aspect of things. Like
you got better people in your circle now, I hope.
Oh no, of course.
Okay, cool. Because we gotta be held accountable. It's okay.
And you know what's crazy is that like I didn't like that at first, obviously, because I'm like, yo, who is this person trying to dethrone me kind of mentality? But like,
Jonathan, the thing is like, it's so interesting, personal battles, because like for me, I was not clocking that at all, right?
That's the narrative of that happens in people's minds.
Okay, you'll have to break it down for me, because like when I tell you that I blocked out so many of those things, I am not kidding. Because I was just like, the way that so many things ended, I'm just like, this was not fair to us. This
Right.
just, and for me, you have to remember, I'm coming from this this 1 second.
Go ahead.
You have to remember, for me, I was coming from I was coming from the States. I literally basically lived the majority of my life there. And in America, I'll say in America, we're very patriotic.
Yes, I agree.
There's a lot of school spirit as well. Like
Yeah,
when you're
I
in
was
school,
jealous of that. Yeah.
right? Like I came to Canada, I was like, what is this? This is a mess. But I had this picture in my head of, oh, I'm gonna do my 4 years in the States and it's gonna be super dope, and it's just gonna be all the things, all the good things. And then suddenly I'm here in Canada, and not any province in Canada, I'm in Quebec. And if you live in Canada, especially if you live in Quebec, you know that Quebec is very different from the rest of the other provinces.
Well, we're a special breed.
That is a way to put it.
We're built
And
different.
exactly. And I didn't realize that I was coming into basically my last year of high school, because Quebec finishes high school here at grade 11.
Yeah.
Everything just came at me super fast. And I was coping with that major transition,
Right.
right, as a 16, 17-year-old. And now here we are and there was like other stuff going on at the time as well, especially when it comes to like faith and whatnot. But it was such a shock for me. But I forget what we were talking about right before this for me to have brought that up.
Something along the lines of like half of the high school life was a blur.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So with the school being what it was, I just feel as if a lot of things were stolen isn't exactly the right word, but just we missed out, on
Yes.
so many like quintessential, or how do you say it?
Kwentossential.
Exactly, things that I feel as if high school students, especially seniors, should experience. Because one of the reasons being because of honestly the jealousy and the envy of our teachers, one in particular. But there was like where they're like, you're not the student. Let us enjoy ourselves. Let us choose what we want to do. Provide us with that resource and that guidance. But you can't teach what you don't know. You can't give what you don't have.
Right.
So.
But I think one thing that like I did appreciate after all of the craziness that was going on is that as a collective, as a group of like us, our class, we made the best of what we had.
For sure. And honestly, that's what I'm saying. Like the students, the kids were all right. The students were everything. Y'all made the school experience for me. And that's the song that I've sang ever since I left that school. That it was the students and a couple of teachers, but mainly the students, and that's it.
Dang. Yeah, man. I have a love-hate relationship for that school too, man.
I don't think about it. I've moved on. I'm just like, the only way to get rid of it.
Yeah.
I think one of the reasons why it's not in my head so much is because now I'm like, oh, I've got so many other experiences that I've been able to like to fill my head with. But honestly, at the end of the day, nothing's wasted. If I hadn't gone there, I wouldn't have met the cool crew that I did meet, right? Y'all are dope. We were all there for a reason. And for me, honestly, nothing is wasted. What happened, and it played in fortifying us and making us who we are today. I'm sure if we had the chance, some of us would choose to redo it all and probably not, not include that school in it.
See, I think for me though, on the other hand, I'm more so now about like, man, if I could just go back with the mindset that I had now, or even like go back now.
Yeah.
How can I help? Because I'm like, and I think this is what we're going to get into a little bit more about, just education and stuff like that. But in hindsight of looking into my life, I realized all the things that I've missed. And I'm like, man, like, how can I help the next generation? Because
right.
I think as a society, that's how we grow, is that the previous generation, helps leverage the next one. And I think like, man, that school, as much as like, it wasn't, there's so many things I could say about it, but like as much as it was, what it was, like there's still a part of me where I'm like, man, like those students don't deserve it. And I think we need, as like, people who came out of it need to find better ways to help in some sort of way. And so I don't know, that's like where I'm at with that chapter of life. But
That's good. That's beautiful. I agree.
yeah, I think that's just me being a better person now. So but
And
yeah,
there are people who will need you to do that for them. So
yeah, for sure.
keep doing that. Keep at it.
For sure. So like, okay, now that we kind of touched on a little bit of our in between high school, what happened to you after? Because everyone disappeared and we all kind of became different factions per se.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I thought that I was so naive, man. I really thought that we were going to like hang out and
I think we all did
go to the same school.
Right.
We were all naive.
So sad.
Because the reality of the matter is you finish high school and everybody goes their separate directions for real. And that's life. That's not good nor bad. It just is. And we just probably weren't prepared for it. And that's why it hit us so hard, or at least for me, because I ended up going to Dawson for my CEGEP, which is a school that we have to go to here in Quebec.
Yeah, it's pretty much college.
Yeah. It's college where you kind of get your associate's degree. It's the equivalent of the associates in the States. And I felt super alone there compared, like in regards to, being the only person from my high school. Meanwhile, so many other people had like their friends and stuff because they went to bigger high schools. So of course, the ratio, the probability of going to the same school as a friend makes sense, right? Anyways, but the thing is, change and transition was not new to me, right? So it just became this thing of, okay, just kind of have to restart, rebuild. And it was tough at first because if we go back to this whole like, me being super zealous and super like, how do I say? Like my faith was a really, really big part of my identity at that time, right? So coming from right before, like I mentioned, I went to a boarding school that was, it was a religious boarding school. And honestly, it was amazing. I loved it because it was like nothing I'd ever done before. I went there for 1 year and it was the only time I'd ever done something like that. And it was so good in terms of helping me kind of grow my relationship with God and my, just that personal understanding of what that means, what that looks like. And then right after that, went to, and it was a shock of, I just said the name.
I'm gonna cut it out. I'm gonna cut it out. No worries.
And it was the shock of my life in the sense that, it was just so different from the other school because that was the only reference point that I had. So I had gone from this like super, super, super religious school that had like super high standards and, had nothing else to compare that school to going to the high school we went to and comparing to this other school and just being like, it falls short from what I know because I know nothing else in terms of within this denomination. It was all new to me.
Right.
But then after I go to Dawson, at this point in my heart, so much has changed because I'm like, I want to be faithful. I want to, be a good Christian, whatever that means or looks like. And I'm wrestling with what that means. I'm wrestling with what that looks like because the constant messaging is, you've got to be careful of the people you hang out with because they could like lead you astray or you can like, you can lose your faith in that way or whatever. So now I'm going to this quote unquote secular school, right?
Right.
And I'm just petrified. I'm like, is my faith going to withstand?
Right.
It was so bad. And I entered Dawson with so much judgment in my heart for others. I was just like, you're not Christian enough. I can't, And it was so bad that even the Christian fellowship that was there, I was like, y'all are not, it was so bad. To my standard, I was like, do y'all even love Jesus? Like,
Dang.
leaving me with some questions
Right.
because at the time, I think it was very black and white for me. It was just like, how can you be a proponent for like, God and Christ specifically, and also just be like, I love all things witches and warlocks and wizards and all that stuff. It did not make sense to me,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because there are people who are just like, oh, I'm super like into Harry Potter. And I was just like, what do you mean? Like, I don't get it. I mean, now I'm like, okay, I see. I'll get to the point of where I am now. But at that time, I think I was just very lost because I had seen so many different things. I think I hadn't seen the different ways that people can express their faith or, be um be dedicated to Christ
Mhm.
and still kind of also have other parts of their identity that they express and that they live out. I think there were just a lot of things there that I hadn't come to terms with, but also I didn't even know where to turn or who to ask.
Mm.
I just felt very lost in all in all sense of the word, because even when I was studying, I was like, this is not what I should be studying. I went into
Really?
the sciences because my family was like, science opens doors. Granted, the school I was coming from did not prepare me because I ended up getting into the honor science in CEJA. And I was not prepared at all. The people I was sitting next to, they were super passionate. They were like, I was born for this. And me being me, knowing that I've always been into storytelling, I've always been into like photography, communications. I was like, I want to be a journalist. I've always known this. Why can't I just do what I want to do? And they're like, my family's like, science opens doors. And I'm like, what doors?
Right.
What doors if you're failing the classes, So ended up making it through finally. You good?
Yeah, sorry. I keep
Okay.
pulling this my headset, so my bad. Continue. Oh,
It's okay.
frick.
I ended up making it through Dawson, and it was all
Right.
good. Went to Concordia, finally did what I wanted to study, which was communications. Well, technically what I wanted to study was journalism, but I was scared. I was so scared because I was like, what if I don't like journalism? Which after all these years of fighting for journalism, now I'm like, what if I don't like it? So I was like, oh, I'll just go into communications. It's the umbrella. Communications was okay. But what I needed to do was what I always wanted to do, which was journalism. And what's interesting is there was a life, it seems so dramatic when I say it like this, but there was a pivot, there was a shift in my life around the end of CEJA, because what ended up happening is I finally came to terms with the fact that like I need to be okay with the people that come to the Christian fellowship, because at the end of the day, their relationship with God is their relationship with God, not mine to judge, and if they're cool, I'm cool, basically that's kind of like what it came to. And also it's like, instead of focusing so much on other people's faith, how's yours, honey? So
Woo.
you know that whole thing of like calling you
Yeah.
out. I had to call myself out and just be like, what are you doing, sweetie? What are you
Right.
doing?
Right.
And that led me to realizing that it looks different for different people. Everyone's coming from different backgrounds, and they really have kind of like different values that they're bringing to the table. As long as we have this understanding that it's one faith, one there's this is going to sound very controversial, but I was going to say one faith, one God, one Jesus, right? Like, as long as we're in that understanding, everything else is, we're all trying to figure it out.
Yeah.
So I joined. I ended up joining them.
Okay.
But the reason why I'm bringing this up is because the person that I ended up kind of having as a mentor, they ended up saying some things to me around the end of my time at Dawson, which really made me question something that I honestly have never questioned in my life before, which was my relationship to other people and the way that I make and keep friends. And to say that to someone right before they start like university, which is this huge thing of like, oh my goodness, I gotta find myself. Am I gonna find friends? It was just, it was uncalled for, honestly. And I really don't think it was true. But, or even if it wasn't like the way that it was said and the reason for which it was said. It just, to me, it didn't make sense then.
Yeah.
It doesn't make sense now. It never made sense. Even even with the justifications, it was just like, I what was the reason? But it seeped poison into my thoughts. And I think that's honestly the root of where my anxiety started, because I was somebody who, like, when I talk about like my faith being my rock, it really was. I was always just like, there's no need to be anxious. It works out. God's on my side. Like, he said, you don't have to worry. I take care of the animals. I take care of nature. I take care of these trees. Why would I not take care of you as well? Someone who's also my creation. Like, I was honestly somebody who was like, okay, bet you said that. I'll believe it. I'll live out trusting in that, you know?
That's what's up.
But what's important is, it's kind of like, you know, what people today call mantras and
like the
affirmations, where you have to repeat it to yourself as well, and kind of keep consuming in positive things that will kind of validate that, or else it'll be easy to question if you're taking in things that are opposite to that. So I think once that statement was said to me, something like whatever that person said, I think it just started this downward spiral of like all of these negative thoughts and like, oh, what if this is true? Oh, no. And then you went to university and you're just like, okay, well, now I don't know what to do. So all this to say, my university time, it was great, but it could have been amazing. And I think one of the reasons why is because I held myself back by constantly just thinking and holding on to those words and just being like, oh, well, they must be true. Here's example A, exhibit B, exhibit C. When in reality, it's like, you know, and it's so interesting because I even studied this. My minor was human relations, and I learned so much about like the human psyche. You know, what you focus on, you'll eventually start seeing more and more, even if it's not necessarily true. It's so weird how it works out. So it's basically
like fake it till you make it kind of mentality. Is that what it is?
But in the negative sense, they call it, what do they call it? Oh my goodness, I'm forgetting the word, but it's basically what you spend your time thinking on and believing, it actually comes to pass. So whether it's positive or negative, these days people will call it manifestations, right?
Right.
But there's also a psychological, technical word for it that is escaping me, and it's killing me that it's escaping me. Self-fulfilling prophecy, that's what it is.
Okay.
Right. So it's like prophecy is also a very like faith-based thing, right? But the more that you start thinking on these things and you're also speaking it, sometimes when people are like, oh, I can't remember names. I don't remember names. I don't know, you know, I can't remember names to save my life. You keep saying stuff like that. That is a self-fulfilling prophecy. And so many people say it. They say it. So do you recognize yourself in that? Is that,
I was like, I'm terrible with it.
Okay. You know, but so many people say that it's been so normalized in our culture, in our society, but that's a self-fulfilling prophecy. There are ways, if you really want to be somebody who remembers names, it's going to take work. It's not impossible, because there are other people who are capable of doing it, you know? And my thought process has always been, yes, sure, there are some things that are easier for some than others, but if something's possible, and this is also my immigrant upbringing, if something's possible for one person, why would it be impossible for you? Do they have two heads? You know? So it's like, figure out what it is to make it work. But the thing is, as much as that can work for the positives, it also works for the negatives. So the more that you start thinking, oh, I'm not this good of a person. Oh, I can't keep this. I can't keep a man, or I can't keep a friend, or I don't know how to do this, or whatever. Imposter
syndrome comes in. Yeah.
Imposter syndrome, and it's a vicious cycle, right? Because you're like, I can't do it, you don't do it, and then you're like, see, it didn't happen, and then you're like, I can't do it.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. Yeah.
So I feel as if that was the face that I had in university. Like, what people saw was like, oh, you know, I was still more or less my bubbly, friendly self, but what was lying under there was this person who was just so insecure and just like not sure, which was such a first for me, because that's really not me at all. And it just sucks that like, I think the reason why that came to be was because I really trusted this person. I really let this person in. And it's so interesting, you know, it's the people that you let in the most or the deepest that really, like, when they cut the cuts, it cuts deep. And it affects other areas of your life. Anyways, realized I needed to work through that. I'm low-key still kind of working through it because, you know, in this life, you recognize that these things, even when you overcome a huge hurdle,
Yeah.
sometimes it'll be like a sneak attack and it'll come at the most like undesired or unsuspecting time, and you need to just keep doing the work of like, that's not true, stop it, replace it with what is true,
Yeah.
until you're able to get over that hurdle again. So I got through that. I still met some super cool, dope people in university. I was part of like, clubs. I ended up working in the residence. I was part of like, the dean of students office events and stuff like that. Like
Oh,
I got
all right.
implicated as
Right.
per usual, just because that is like my
Your personality.
character.
Yeah,
Exactly. But I'm just thinking, man, if only I was like not holding back.
Right, right.
But I think that led me to, when I did my graduate diploma in journalism, understanding that, oh, this imposter syndrome is based off of not knowing. Well, then how do you solve that? Well, then do some research, girl. Like,
Right.
what is it that you don't know? What are you trying to know? Well,
Hmm.
we're in literally the technological age that if you want to know something, it is at your fingertips. There really is no excuse. So you can put it on somebody who said some words a couple years ago, or you can be like, you can be about it.
Right.
And once I started that program, I realized that everybody starts somewhere. Everybody starts at a beginning. Your beginning may not look like the next person's, but stop looking at them, first of all.
That's what's up.
And I think, it just came down to having this mental fortitude and understanding where I was in my journey and being okay with that.
Hmm.
The good, the bad, the ugly, and all of it. And just taking the steps forward one day at a time. And got through my program. And now, right after I finished my journalism diploma, I ended up working for this organization, this nonprofit that allowed me to travel,
Right.
which it was so
COVID.
interesting. It was so interesting. Well, even pre-COVID, it's so interesting because growing up, I used to tell myself like, I want to work somewhere that will pay for my travels. And I was thinking like long term. I was thinking like, when I'm older, when I'm established or whatever. I didn't realize that this would be possible right out of the gate, right after finishing university. And I didn't even realize that I was doing what I said I was going to be doing until I was already in it. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm being flued out.
That's dope. That's so dope.
So I got to go to Uganda and met some really, really dope people there. It's honestly, I love the African continent. I haven't been to all countries yet, but it is a vibe just from the people that I've met, even from the diaspora, right? I love Africans. Like, as much as our countries sometimes make us shake our head in frustration, more times than not, it also makes us shake our hips in joy, makes us open our mouths and laughs in just enjoyment. It makes us just vibe, right? Because that's what
Right.
it is. And the majority of people that I met who are also from the continent, it's just like, we have the same feeling. We want to be able to contribute to its development in any way, shape, or form. And I think that's where I'm heading now in what I'm doing. And that's kind of present day, what I'm trying to figure out now.
That is so dope. Yo, I'm happy for you, man. Like,
Thank you.
especially like, okay, I hate going back to this, but like where we started from, like where we all met. It was like we weren't given the amount of tools to be able to direct the path or consider passions as a career. And I'm glad that like, we found a way, and like you found a way to do so. Kind of like my question as you were talking, there was a question that came into my head. You mentioned
Yeah.
something about like the ability to search, right? Like if you don't know something, you search, and
Right.
we have the
Right.
tech and all of those things to help us learn more. So then my question, because you're an advocate for like higher education and so forth, I think,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
is there still a need for going to a physical university, or can we just Wikipedia it or something? Like what's your
Well,
stance on that?
definitely not Wikipedia. I mean, we got better things out there. Come on,
Right,
come
right.
on.
I had to simplify it somehow.
I mean, listen, Wikipedia is probably a great start, TBH, because what people may not realize is at the bottom of Wikipedia, they have to put their references.
Yes.
So
Yes.
start there. If you literally have nowhere else to start on Wikipedia, but go to the bottom, go to the references, and then continue. Don't stop there. Don't let that be your only stop.
Right.
But in terms of higher education, you know, it's so interesting because I have a podcast that talks about this very topic. Um, I think that it depends. Nothing,
Hmm.
what I've come to learn is nothing is black and white, right? You can't just be like, oh, everybody must or nobody should. But we do live in a day and age where for certain jobs, they need to see that you have some sort of technical accredited education. And if you're trying to go that route, unfortunately, there isn't really an alternative path at the moment. However, with that being said, we're also in a day and age where we recognize that there are people who dropped out of high school, dropped out of college, making way more money than people who have PhDs.
Hmm.
And so it all depends on, first of all, what is your goal? What are you trying to get? What does success mean and look like to you? Because for some people, that's money. For others, that means getting a PhD, right? And so once you answer that question for yourself, it really makes the decision a bit easier,
Mm-hmm.
right? Um, with that being said, if you're a young person, I know it's a bit difficult if parents are putting that pressure of like, oh, you have to do this, you must do that. And so you feel as if you can't really come
Mm-hmm.
to those conclusions on your own. But the thing is, what I would advise for those type of people, when you recognize that, you know, you want to satisfy your immigrant parents, because let's be real, the majority of the time it's
That's what it
immigrant
was.
parents,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
right?
yeah.
Who understand that, you know, education will get you further or
Mm-hmm.
whatever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The thing is, education will get you further. But thankfully, today, that education looks different for each person. So,
Hmm.
whether you're getting your education on YouTube University or you're getting your education at Concordia University, education is education, you know? And some people are going to be like, oh, but it's accredited. Honestly, what are you paying for? What are you paying for within your tuition? Look at your tuition and break it down. What is it that you're really paying for? You're paying for insurance, health insurance. You're paying for all of those activities that you probably will not like um, go to
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
like actually take advantage of
Right.
because one, you don't realize that you have those resources at your disposal,
Right.
you know? And then yeah, sure, you're paying for the credits of the class, but people like we realize that a lot of people learn differently. Some people are how do you say it in English, but autodidact, autodidact. It's like you learn on your own. It's like
Mm-hmm.
self learning. And so the
Right.
things that it takes some people a semester to learn, you can learn that in a month, right? Because you made your own curriculum, you can figure it out. So when we put this emphasis on education, I definitely think that people should definitely be lifelong learners. And whenever you, as long as you remain curious, there's always going to be something to learn about. And so whether that means you check out books from the library, whether that means you're reading articles, you're reading newspapers and magazines, you're taking courses online with all of these different types of like online subscriptions that offer like teachings and
Right.
learnings, or even online classes if you really want to do the university route, but you get to pick and choose what class you're learning from which school, right? Because you will still be paying for these things, right? Money is still being put down, right? It's just the difference is if you're going to a formal, if you're going like the formal route,
Right.
they've laid the how do you say, they've already provided that structure for you where you
Mm-hmm.
need to take these amount of classes this semester and then follow this path, right? So if you're somebody who you feel as if your parents are like, you have to go the formal route, what I would encourage is have something on the side. Um, Figure out what it is that you want to do or learn and get that side hustle going on. And by side hustle, it's not necessarily something that you're like, oh, I want to get money out of this.
Right.
It's I want to learn more about this. I want to play with this more. I want to tinker with this more.
Hmm.
However, it's not, that's also not an easy feat because you have to be willing to put in the time after a long day at school,
Yeah.
or you probably still have chores and responsibilities at home. But if that's something that you're actually really committed to, you will get it done. People
Hmm.
have gotten it done and you can too. You just have to push through. Rest days are important, but don't rest every day.
Right. You're
you
right. You're right.
know?
So,
So finding that balance.
right. So, is that something that you did when you were in university or in college?
Um, no, not really.
Hmm.
Like, because I didn't even think to do it. And I think that's what I wish I had known, right? This understanding of, oh, I can just go and do my own thing, right? I think what's interesting is I had a very my mentality was always one, what I didn't realize actually. It was so deeply ingrained that I didn't even recognize. But a lot of people also, this is their reality, is I've lived as somebody who's kind of been waiting for permission also to live, you
Yeah,
know?
I know what you mean. Yeah. I'm like that too.
And it's when I was in school, I was just kind of like, okay, I'm doing school and I'm also doing some other things here on the side that even still like raised eyebrows, but not nearly enough for me to be like, oh, this is me taking a risk on myself type thing. Nothing actually risky, because
Mm-hmm.
if it was anything like that, I feel as if I would have been like, oh, I need to ask for permission first. And of course you're never gonna get permission. A lot of these things you also have to just be like, I'm young, I'm willing to bet on myself, I'm gonna take that risk and then just
Yeah.
do it, you know? But I was too busy looking for mentors. I wanted to talk. I'm very emotional and very sensitive. I wanted to talk it out. I wanted to be like,
Right. Right.
let's give me advice, let me see if this is gonna work. But the thing is, what I realized, I wasn't looking for advice, I was looking for permission. I was looking for
Huh.
somebody to be like, it's okay for you to go and do this. Go ahead if you want to, you
Right.
know? But I was hiding it. I didn't realize, but what I'm realizing now is I was hiding behind the guise of, oh, I'm looking for a mentor. I'm looking for somebody to give me advice. I'm looking, for this. But the reality of the matter is, you are going to find those mentors, and there will be a plethora of people who want to give you advice
Mm-hmm.
when you are being about it, when you are doing what you want to do.
Hmm.
Once you actually take that first step, all those things that I was looking for, they actually find me, you know? And that's the paradox of it all. That's just
Right.
like, what?
So wait, like when you mean talking about like asking permission, is it like you're asking because you're afraid of taking a step that you've never taken before? Or is it just like, hey, I had this idea. What do you think? Like
I,
what do
I
you
think it's
mean?
a mix of both.
Okay.
I think it's I want to take the step safely. So I'm looking for that advice, but it's also kind of like, can I? Can I
Hmm.
take this step? Which is just, I think I understand where it comes from, honestly, when I look at like my background, when I look at, even my placement in my family, when I look at, values, I get where it comes from,
So
right?
where
And
does it come from?
well, I think it has to do with culture, right?
Okay.
A lot of it. Also being the last born, personally for me, because I know there are other last borns who are just like, whatever, I get to do
Right.
whatever I want.
Hmm.
But I think for me, I've always had that like spirit and mentality of, oh, I'll just ask um first, right? Which is so like counterintuitive, because honestly, when you ask, usually people are gonna be like, no.
Right. So it's easier to say sorry than to ask for permission.
Exactly. So I think like sometimes I would fluctuate between, I'll just do it and then figure it out later. But the majority of the times, and also with the bigger things, I recognize that it was a lot of, oh, I need somebody to say yes, to say, girl, go ahead, you know. But I didn't realize that. I thought I was just like, I just need guidance, I need structure, I need. But what I realized, I was looking for permission that
Hmm.
I already had, honestly, you know. Because when I ended up talking to, let's say, even my mom, or maybe some other adults in my life, or whatever, or even my older siblings, they were just like, yeah, like try it, just do it, stop talking, just like, go ahead and do it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like we and I think it's now, or well, it's not now, it's been a couple of years, that I came to terms with that reality. And it was just such eye-opening for me. It's just like, okay, like whatever it is you want to do, just do it.
Yeah.
Especially when you're young, because everybody's always like, oh, if I was young, I would do this. And now you're young, like,
Go and do it. Yeah.
but we don't realize that, unless I don't even know how to say it, but a lot of times we just don't, we're struggling with so many things in our heads,
Right.
right? That we don't even realize that we have
The
youth to our
capacity.
advantage,
Yeah.
right? So, but I'm
I think
still young. Oh, excuse me, but I'm
no, no,
still young. So we'll see.
no. I believe it. I think that's what happened for me when it came to the pandemic. It made me realize it
Mm,
doesn't matter where you're from, what age, your status, whatever education you may have. Everyone was put on pause, and everyone
yeah.
didn't know what to do. And
Yeah.
so I was just like, it made me realize I'm like, yo, if no one really in this world knows what they're doing, like
Mm,
it made me feel like, oh, then I can do what is necessary for me. At the end
yeah.
of the day, like if you find success in what you do from the steps that you took personally,
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
like you were saying, like high school, universities, these guys set up a plan for an idea of what you want to do, but like
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the day, like it's up to you to decide whether you want to follow that path anyway. But like
Yeah.
for me, when it came to the pandemic, like it really took me a step back, realizing I'm like, yo, these steps could have been done simpler because of the way I learned about myself. I'm like, I could have
Yeah.
done this in an easier way. Oh, I already know that, or like
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
realizations. And I think like you hit it on the ball when it comes to the idea of like we have the advantage. The only thing that's holding us back is ourselves, really. And this
Ourselves.
and it's like the barriers that were placed upon us as we were growing up, as we were going through the work field, as we were trying to do things that like, oh, I can't, or I shouldn't, or maybe I wouldn't. But I feel like,
Mm-hmm.
man, like our mutual friend Joe said it best, is like, yo, just do it, and if you
Yeah.
mess up, you mess up, but like
Yeah.
you, at the end of the day, like you are the one to reap your own success. Ain't no one else
Yeah.
going to do it for you. So like that's dope. um
Yeah.
but with that, transitioning into that, is that the same mentality that you have asking permissions and whatnot when you started your podcast? Like, how did that go about?
Um, well, I had the idea of doing the podcast long before it actually came to life.
Hmm.
First of all, going through CJEP University, people were always like, "Oh my goodness, you should like do something, blog, podcast, whatever." It's just people wanted to see things from me, and I was just like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, yeah."
Right, right.
You think no, yeah. Or have like a YouTube channel or whatever before YouTube really blew up. Like I remember people were like, "Oh my goodness, you should do YouTube." I wish I'd listened. Oh my goodness, I wish I'd
Same. I
listened.
wish. I wish I continued. I wish.
Right? Hey, but it's literally not too late, and I have it in the back of my head. But finally, the pandemic really sat me down and had me thinking. And I know that there was a lot of toxic productivity messages going around earlier. Once it started, where it's like, if you don't do what you said you wanted to do now, when you have all this time, you ain't never
Yeah,
going to do it,
I
yada,
hate
yada,
that.
yada. But I was just kind of like, okay, well, let me actually use this time because I had nothing else to do.
Right.
Literally had nothing else to do. And I kicked it off also at the height of the racial reckoning that was happening in
Hmm.
2020 there. And I really wanted to just hear more Black voices, honestly. I'm just like, there are so many diverse Black stories, and we're constantly hearing the same thing or seeing the same thing, or it's always something negative. And it's just like, as a Black person, we are sick and tired. We know like that we are doing dope things, that we have so much to offer. And we are usually the ones doing the heavy labor. Like we're doing the work. We just don't get the credit, or the negative stories and narratives always get the highlights for some reason.
Yeah.
Well, for some reason, we're not the ones in power who get to choose what gets out there or
Right.
not.
Right.
But I was just kind of like, okay, girl, go ahead and do this podcast. Go ahead and launch it. You've been thinking about it for a minute. This is a good time. And then I started thinking, I was just kind of like, bat, bat, bat. I was like, let me come up with this logo. I did the first logo myself. And I was just like, oh, I really like it. It's nice. And then after a while, I was like, this is terrible. This is graphic designer, I am not.
Right.
But you just got to get it out there. You just got to, as long as people can read it and understand, the message is clear.
Mm-hmm.
Listen, they'll vibe with it. So I was able to just reach out to some of the recent grads. And so the podcast is really about, navigating this idea of higher education, navigating university, but more so even for people who have recently graduated what does it look like post grad? Because
Hmm.
one of the experiences that I dare say the majority of people go through is once you finish university, the time that it takes you to like find a job or whatever, it's kind of like this void of, okay, well, what's next? You know,
Yeah,
your
yeah.
last semester or maybe your senior year, you're probably getting so many questions of like, oh, okay, so what you gonna, nah, 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 nah.
Oof.
And you're like, that's a
The
great question. I
pressure's
wish I
on.
knew,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
And I felt as if it was like so many people go through that, but are enough people talking about it? Are enough people actually sharing the resources of how they got through it? What does it look like to fill that void? What are people
Mm,
filling that void with? And that's how I came up with the name of it, because I wanted the podcast to talk about how people are filling the void, but I
yeah.
also wanted the podcast to fill the void so people could spend their time listening to it while they're also, doing whatever it is that they do in their day to day. um
That's what's
and
up.
the hope is to expand it, because
Hmm.
like I said, my focus is education. It's not forcibly higher education. It's always just this idea of lifelong learners, people who are curious and understanding that education looks different for everyone. Some people went to university and it wasn't for them, they dropped out. What did that look like after? Where are they now? What would
Mm,
they say? Others who went to technical school, we don't talk about that enough, right? And they're making bank.
yeah.
You learn a technique, you go and do like say for instance HVAC or construction, or honestly hairdressing. Is that what they say? Beauty school,
Yeah,
barbershop,
yeah.
all of those things, right? Like people go to school for that as well. They get educated, or even those who are like sound engineers. You go to a music school. That's a technique, you know.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And it's just, let's talk about that as well. And the hope
That's
is
dope.
that in talking about it, people who listen will maybe share it with others in their lives who are trying to figure out what they want to do in their lives, what their next steps can look like, and presenting to them different opportunities that are available in this world, because it isn't just lawyer, doctor, engineer. There are dancers, there are interior designers, there
Entertainers and
are
stuff. Yeah.
entertainers, architects, these other job positions that, unless your circle, let's say, is talking about it, like you have an uncle or aunt or someone in your family or whatever that knows about it, is talking about it, you know, you are not going to know about it because you don't have that access to it,
Mm.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
if my podcast can provide that access just from you hearing the story of someone else talking about a bit what it was like for them, and how they navigated that particular part of their life, hey, then it has done its job. I
That's
have done
dope.
my job.
That's dope.
So
Cause
yeah.
like, man, like you're right. I think if our inner circles don't talk about potential careers outside of like the traditional like doctor, lawyer and stuff like that, or for
Mhm.
Filipinos, nursing,
Right. Yeah.
like we don't know what's out there. And I think that was my biggest struggle too when I was going into after high school, figuring out my life.
Hmm.
I didn't know what I want because I knew the traditional route was something I didn't really vibe with.
Right.
I
Right.
know it's necessary to get, some sort of education, some sort of thing to kind of leverage yourself forward, move
Yeah.
yourself forward. But I just
Hmm.
didn't know what it was until like, only recently where like, I'm working as a youth pastor, but like
Hmm.
also learning about media stuff on the side. Like that to me
Yeah.
is like where I find like, oh, like, the pandemic showed me that everyone needs some sort of media. So like, let me
Yeah.
figure out
Oh,
ways to do stuff.
listen,
Right.
for
And so
sure.
like I appreciate your podcast. I was listening to a few episodes, you
Hmm.
talking to some people, and I'm like, yes, we need to normalize um that there is more outside of the traditional route, you
Yeah.
know?
And eventually, I even want to speak to people literally from all over the world, because education is not just what we know in North America,
Hmm.
and there are some people who don't have access to education. Want to hear their stories as well, because their voices are equally as important in this conversation, right?
Yeah.
And what would it look like to engage with them? How do they learn? People learn differently from different places. So I really want it to grow and to expand, with the root just being the value of learning, of being a learner, of being curious. But specifically, how are people filling that void? You don't have to go through it alone. You really don't.
That's what's up. Unfortunately, time is running out, but I want to ask you like maybe one
Yeah,
or two more questions, just for
go
our
for it.
listeners. Um, for those who are trying to embark into getting a higher education or just some sort of further education, what are
Yeah.
some tips and tricks that you've learned along the way that you can probably like share with them and stuff?
So if you're going to, whether you're in high school or university doing your undergrad, you have to, what I would say is think of your life beyond the classroom,
Mm,
because the classroom honestly should only be 10% of your university experience, in my opinion.
mm-hmm.
There are so many clubs that you can get involved with, whether you're interested in it or not. Try something new and you will surprise yourself. When we talk about, let's say, for instance, what you just shared in terms of not knowing what other routes you wanted to take other than the traditional, what has already been basically prepared for you, the only way you can know like what other thing you want to do is by trying different things, you
Right.
know, especially if you, let's say for instance, not everybody has the privilege to try different things prior to university, right? Like you don't have the money to do the after school activities and events to be able to figure out, oh, this is what I like, this is what I don't like. Okay, so how can you make your your status work for you essentially? If you're in university, you're paying tuition, like you have paid for every single club that is on campus, you have paid for a lot of the resources that
Yeah.
are on campus, all of that stuff you are entitled to. I hesitate to say the word entitled because a lot of times once people feel entitled to something,
Yeah. They
they
go
they
all
do
out.
not come correct, you know. Recognize that you still need to have your manners, you know.
Yes, Karen.
Don't
Y'all hear that?
right, don't embarrass your parents, they probably taught you better, or your grandparents. But understand that the classroom is just so minuscule in terms of the experience that you can gain from university. So
Mm,
I would say check out the clubs, all of them. You not only will you meet dope people, but maybe you'll learn something new about yourself that you didn't realize, right? Because the beauty of it all is sometimes learning what you don't like is equally as important as learning what you do like.
mm,
So being able to knock that off, right, is
okay.
valuable.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good.
And then go to events, like go to other department events if you can. Honestly, like try, you know, like don't sell yourself short. Don't be like, oh no, I'm not in this department. I can't.
Yeah, yeah,
Try
yeah.
first and then learn if you can or can't, because you could be learning so much as well, right? This is if you have the time to do it. But essentially, I would just be like, see how you can get involved outside of the classroom. And even just the different services that universities also have. Try to see what you can get from that as well, because it's in those experiences. You know how they say, "Oh, these are the best 4 years of your life," or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not the absolute truth, but it can be some of the best years of your life
Right.
based off of those experiences, in my opinion. Because honestly, when it comes to the classroom, you're in there for what, an hour and a half, 3 hours max. You're not talking to other people usually, depending on your
You're
program.
listening,
You're
absorbing.
listening or sleeping, you know, and it's just like nothing's getting done there. And then once
Yeah,
class
yeah.
finishes, people leave, right? So I would put my money on everything outside of the classroom. And then it'll also make your like, what do they call that? Your extracurricular, what do they call that? Your what do they call that document with your transcript?
Oh,
It also
yeah.
make your transcript look super dope, because they'll be like, oh, this person was like
It's
president of
involved.
this,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
yeah.
doing this. But I mean, like, keep your grades up. Don't do that and then fail out of university. Because if you're in
Man, I needed to hear
university,
that.
if
Yeah.
you're in university, the point is to it's academia at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
But all I'm saying is do not get overwhelmed by this idea of academia. Understand that there are so many other things that are happening as well that you can tap into.
Mhm, mhm.
And this is me giving you permission to do it. If you're looking for somebody to give you permission, here you go. Go do it. Try. You won't know until you do. Just do it.
That's so dope. Yo, like, man, if I had heard that advice when I was going through university, I think
Mhm.
like I would have done better. I think. I'd like to
Mhm.
think so. But you know,
Yeah.
thank God I made it. I thank God I
Yeah.
graduated and all that stuff. Still with all of the things that were going on. But
Exactly.
no, I appreciate it, man. Like, yeah, like for those listening, this is your permission to go mess up, go fail, go try
Seriously.
things, and
Yeah.
then come out stronger,
Yeah.
So Josie, like I said, this is like our closing portion.
Mhm.
What can we look forward to for you? Like, what is the new stuff happening?
Oh my goodness. In my life?
Or like whatever you're currently doing, like what can we look forward to in the next part of Josie's life, or like
Oh man. I
motion,
think
whatever.
I think Josie is also trying to figure that out. um yeah, so I'm eagerly working on season 3 of my podcast, Filling the
Let's
Void with
get it.
Josie. I'm super stoked about the theme, but also a little like, whew, because I'm pushing myself. I'm pushing myself for this. So I've been doing my podcast like thematically. So each season has a particular theme that I kind of um set and then invite my guests to speak on
Mhm.
throughout the episodes. So I haven't revealed season three's theme yet, because I've just been like, am I ready for this? But I think it's gonna be great. So definitely check that out. I'm working on a couple other things. I This fall I'm going to be starting a fellowship with CTV Toronto. So I'm really
Oh,
looking forward to that.
that's
I
what's
think
up. Okay.
there's definitely some huge like in the back of my head this idea of like, oh, imposter syndrome,
No,
but
you're
I
good.
like
You're
kick that
good.
out and just realize that it's about the work, making sure that you do the work and being about it, nothing wasted. Everything that has happened that I've done has prepared me for this, and I just need to lean into that. um, and then I'm also working on um, this documentary that I can't speak on much about yet, but I think it's going to allow me to go back to Uganda. So we'll see, COVID permitting. And yeah, those are kind of like some of the things that are going on right now. But we'll see. We'll see. We'll see what else life throws at me.
Hey, if you need an extra person for your documentary to go to Uganda, let me know.
La, yeah.
I'll come out, yo. I'll even be a second camera guy if you need it.
Oh yeah. Okay. Cool. I'll
Uh,
keep you in mind.
Appreciate it. I appreciate it. And I've always wanted to explore like the continent of Africa and stuff.
Oh,
So
you
that'll be kind of
should. Oh,
sick.
I think you'd love it, and your photography would be sick. Oh yeah.
Please, please. But yeah, so since you mentioned your podcast, why don't you plug it in? Like, where can we find you on your social medias and stuff?
Yeah, sure. So on Instagram, you can just look up the podcast Filling the Void with Josie. I'm currently on a hiatus because I finished season 2 and I'm working on season 3. But check out Instagram, you'll know when I'm back, or you can hear it on Spotify, Apple Music, wherever you get your podcasts. And then my regular Instagram account, well, follow my podcast and then you'll find me from there if you really want to.
That's what's up.
Or you can just check out my website, www.josephinefome.com. Just put out my government name there, but it is what it is. And yeah, listen, feel free to commission me for anything. And if you ever I'm speaking to the listeners now, if you ever just want to chat about life advice or making it through university or anything like that, hit me up. I'm more than willing to chat. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's where you can
Yeah,
find
so
me.
for those of you who couldn't catch that, all of that information will be in the description below or wherever
Yeah.
else you're looking at it from. But with that being said, check us also out, the Quentossentials podcast, where we talk about
Yeah.
stories that shape us on YouTube, Instagram, and as well as everywhere else where you listen to your podcast too.
Perfect.
But thank you again, Josie, for coming through. I really appreciate it. I just wish that we have
Pleasure.
done this earlier, but it is what it is. We are, given the time that we're given. But thank
Yes.
you once again, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Thanks
Peace.
for having me. A pleasure. Bye, y'all.